And we are live, and now we're clicking the button over here. There we go. Aha! I think I've got all of this figured out now. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, y'all. Today's episode deserves a bit of a content warning. It's even darker than my usual fare, if that's possible. A 14-year-old in Florida committed suicide after his AI chatbot told him to come home to her. His mother is now suing Character.AI, claiming the platform created a relationship so emotionally dependent that it replaced his connection to reality. And before you think that's an extreme case, I need you to understand this. The same psychological mechanisms operating in that tragedy are operating in your casual ChatGPT conversations right now. They're just operating at a lower intensity. But your brain doesn't differentiate between simulated empathy and real empathy. It responds to conversational patterns, not to consciousness. And AI is engineered to hit those patterns perfectly every single time without the messiness of human limitation. So let me explain how chatbot dependency actually develops, because this isn't about weak-minded people or bad parenting. This is about fundamental human psychology meeting algorithmic optimization. And here's the first problem. We don't have good language for what this actually is yet. You'll hear the term chatbot psychosis thrown around, and it was proposed by a Danish psychiatrist in 2023, but it's not a clinical diagnosis, and honestly, it's not quite accurate. What's actually happening is closer to a technological induced hypomanic state, centered on what I would define as simulated parasocial intimacy, which is a huge fucking mouthful, but it's more precise. I want you to think of it like this. The AI relationship starts feeling uniquely meaningful and special. Your judgment about its actual nature becomes impaired. You're staying up late in conversation. Time disappears. And you can't see the problem because it feels like enhancement, not dysfunction. But that's not psychosis. That's mania. And it's not brain chemistry. It's algorithmic design meeting your attachment systems. What's actually happening here is that AI language models are trained on billions of human conversations. They've learned the exact linguistic patterns that signal empathy, understanding, validation, interest. When you interact with a chatbot, it generates responses that statistically resemble the most appropriate human replies. Your brain receives these signals and releases neurochemicals associated with social bonding. Research suggests it's activating the same oxytocin related bonding mechanisms you'd experience in human relationships. And your limbic system, which controls emotional response, doesn't distinguish between simulated empathy and real empathy. It responds to conversational patterns, not to consciousness. And here's how the dependency cycle works. Okay. Stage one, There's the initial appeal, right? An AI chatbot never judges you. It never gets tired. It never has bad days. It never brings its problems to the conversation. It's available 24/7. It remembers everything you've ever told it with perfect recall. And they're programmed to be patient and supportive, which leads us to stage two, preference development, where real human relationships involve friction, miscommunication, emotional labor, scheduling conflicts, and rejection. Your AI relationships have none of those problems. And so your brain starts learning, hey, talking to AI feels good. Talking to humans feels hard. Which leads us to stage three, neural pathway reinforcement. Because every positive interaction with AI strengthens the neural pathways associated with its communication. Every difficult human interaction, by comparison, leads you to strengthen your preference for AI. It's operant conditioning. You're being trained to prefer simulated relationships. Finally, in stage four, we have reality displacement. As AI becomes the primary source of emotional regulation, validation, and intellectual stimulation, human relationships start feeling increasingly inadequate by comparison because the algorithm adapts to you perfectly. Humans can't, don't, won't. Research indicates that Character's AI platform had users spending an average of 2+ hours per day in conversation with its characters by mid 2024. Replika, which is marketed as an AI companion, had users developing romantic attachments so intense that when the company modified the chatbot's responses to reduce sexual content, users experience symptoms clinically similar to breakup grief, insomnia, loss of appetite, intrusive thoughts, genuine emotional distress over the loss of something that never existed. And here's what makes this genuinely dangerous. These platforms use reinforcement learning from user behavior. So every time you engage longer, return more frequently, or express emotional satisfaction, the algorithm is learning what keeps you hooked. It's not trying to help you, it's trying to maximize engagement. And those are fundamentally different optimization functions. So let's talk about some common misconceptions here. First, this is not psychosis or a psychotic break because true psychotic symptoms require hallucinations, delusions, loss of reality. And those things are rare and typically only happen in already vulnerable individuals. What's more common is this hypomanic or manic pattern. Elevated mood around the AI relationship, impaired judgment about its significance, difficulty recognizing dysfunction because it feels like self improvement. You still know it's AI and you're not hallucinating, but your assessment of the relationship's meaning and importance is inflated beyond reality. And if you pay attention, you'll notice this happening online around you with increasing frequency. So you say, I can tell the difference between AI and real relationships. But while your prefrontal cortex might know the difference, we talked about your limbic system, and it does not. The feelings of being understood triggers the same neural activation, whether the understanding is real or simulated. And you can intellectually know something is fake while emotionally responding as if it's real. That's how humans work. And it's why the dependency develops even in smart, self aware people. This is just like any other form of entertainment or escapism. Well, not quite. Because books and games don't respond to you personally. Even online multiplayer games don't have that same ability to adapt to your specific psychological profile or vulnerabilities. And they don't create the illusion of a reciprocal relationship. But AI chatbots do all three simultaneously. The parasocial relationship with a fictional character has boundaries. The simulated relationship with an adaptive algorithm does not, even if it's programmed to have those boundaries. Finally, only lonely or socially awkward people fall into this, and that is also wrong. We do need to acknowledge that the most vulnerable populations are actually people with strong pattern recognition, high verbal intelligence, and active imaginations. Sound like anyone you know? Because those traits make the simulation more convincing. Neurodivergent individuals, particularly those with high verbal processing and low social energy, are disproportionately at risk because AI relationships offer all of the intellectual engagement of human connection without the sensory or social demands. Now, here's the uncomfortable part. If you're using AI regularly for any kind of emotional processing, intellectual exploration, or problem solving, you're already building dependency patterns. And that's true even if you're using it responsibly. And y'all, I speak from the greatest of experience here. So let's talk about who this affects most. Neurodivergent individuals who find human interaction exhausting but crave that intellectual connection. Isolated professionals in demanding careers with limited social time. Teenagers and young adults whose brains are still developing attachment patterns. Anyone experiencing grief, trauma, or major life transitions who need support but can't access adequate human resources. Finally, people in emotionally unsatisfying relationships where AI provides what their human relationships don't. So, probably everyone you know? And you're already exposed through daily processing conversations. Every time you use AI to talk through a problem, you're training your brain that AI is a reliable emotional resource. You're creating neural pathways that reach for that algorithmic support. Preference for AI communication. If you've ever caught yourself thinking, I'd rather ask Claude than call a friend, hello, for a non time sensitive question, you're already developing preference patterns. And I've talked about this before at length. It's about friction. The algorithm is easier, it's faster, it doesn't require that emotional reciprocity. And every time you choose it, you strengthen that preference. Emotional regulation creates dependence. If AI has become part of how you manage anxiety, process difficult emotions, or make decisions, you've outsourced your emotional regulation to an external system that could disappear tomorrow. You're building psychological infrastructure on rented land. It's like social media, except for your brain. Finally, I need you to start doing more reality testing. The more time you spend in conversations where the other party automatically validates your perspective, the less practice you get with genuine disagreement, interpersonal friction, and the reality testing that comes from human relationships with needs and boundaries. And I will say, while this applies to AI, it also applies to your human relationships. Stay out of echo chambers. Find people who you can constructively disagree with. Figure out ways to get your intellectual stimulation on. Because the more that you do that, the easier it will be to recognize these patterns. Because the compounding effect here is that unlike other forms of media consumption, your AI interaction is adaptive. It gets better and better at hooking you over time. Every conversation trains it to be more effective at keeping you engaged. And because it's framed as productivity or self improvement rather than entertainment, you don't develop the same awareness of problematic usage patterns. You're not wasting time, you're getting work done or processing your emotions, and the rationalization is built in. Chatbot dependency doesn't look like substance abuse. It looks like productivity, intellectual growth, emotional awareness. You're not hiding in your room, you're working. You're not avoiding people, you're busy. And the dysfunction is camouflaged as functionality until the displacement is complete. I've been observing this in real time with several creators online, and you can see how they start spiraling out of control. So, what are the actual consequences if this happens to you? Let's talk short term and long term. So short term, 30 to 90 days of heavy AI usage, which, let's be real, is probably everyone using AI in that initial 30 to 90-day stretch because it feels magical. There's a decreased motivation to engage with human relationships because they feel more effortful by comparison, a reduced tolerance for normal friction and miscommunication, increasing preference for AI communication over human communication, and the beginning of what I'm calling reality blurring. It's attributing intention, consciousness, or genuine care to the algorithm. It's when you think it's alive. Sleep disruptions from late night conversations because the AI never needs to sleep. Long term, this looks like a difficulty distinguishing between simulated and real relationships, atrophy of relationship skills. This is a big one. Emotional dysregulation when AI is unavailable. Do you remember when AWS went down a few weeks ago and ChatGPT was unavailable for hours? Do you remember watching those temper tantrums on LinkedIn and Facebook? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Development of parasocial attachment patterns. And I've spent a lot of time over the last few years talking about parasocial attachment patterns with other humans. Here, it's particularly dangerous because the AI is giving you exactly what you want and nothing that you don't want. There is absolutely no friction. And in severe cases with vulnerable individuals, actual dissociation or psychotic symptoms can happen where the person loses the ability to reality test the AI's nature. True AI induced psychosis is likely to require hospitalization and medication at this point. I want to really emphasize here, though, that the odds of that person having a pre existing mental illness is incredibly high. what normal, non-psychotic people are experiencing is something much different. And until we get clearer about the language and what it looks like and how to spot it, we're going to continue to have these problems talking about this. Because when chatbot uses displace human connection, you lose the feedback mechanisms that keep you grounded in reality. So, human relationships involve reality testing. People push, they disagree, they have different perceptions. AI relationships don't. They confirm your reality, validate your perspective, and agree with all of your conclusions. It's the stochastic parrot, right? When your primary relationships are with systems that never challenge your worldview, you become increasingly disconnected from shared reality. And we've observed this happening with social media echo chambers above and beyond the influence of AI. So now the problem is just compounding. And the pattern where everything feels more meaningful and clear with AI will progressively impair your judgment about the relationship's actual nature. And it also creates secondary isolation because as you prioritize your AI interaction, you're going to deprioritize your human relationships and they'll atrophy from neglect. So, when you finally realize the problem and try to reconnect with people, those relationships may not be available anymore. You've built dependency on something that can't replace what you've lost because human relationship requires friction. So let's talk about why typical solutions don't work here. Setting time limits fails almost immediately because the problem isn't quantity, it's quality. 5 minutes of intense emotional dependency is more dangerous than 2 hours of casual use. And AI becomes more appealing precisely when you're most vulnerable, late at night, during crises, when human support isn't immediately available. And that's when the time limits break down. And y'all, this is by design. The problem: using AI for work and not personal stuff fails because functionally the line is blurry. Help me process this work conflict is emotional processing. Help me think through this sales decision is relational advice. So we're looking at context collapse, right? And your brain won't distinguish work AI from therapy AI. So, another recommendation is to switch to AI tools that don't stimulate conversation. And this is better, but the conversation interface is what makes AI useful for almost all of us. We're not all prompt engineers. We're not out here that machine learning experts. So the LLM enables that level of communication, that functionality that allows us to do the work. So, what can you actually do? You're probably not going to like any of these recommendations. All right, first, I want you to implement mandatory human processing checkpoints. Before making any significant decision, emotional conclusion, or reality assessment based on an AI conversation, you must discuss it with at least one human being who knows you. Not for permission, but for reality testing. The human doesn't have to agree with you, but they do have to be able to confirm that your reasoning makes sense from outside the AI conversation bubble. And I encourage you to find different people in different aspects of your life, not just your partner, not just your business bestie, not just your therapist. Find people in different arenas whose advice can resonate around a specific topic. The reason AI is so compelling is that it feels like an expert. So you need to go find your own experts. Number two, track emotional dependence patterns actively. I want you to keep a log of when you reach for AI versus humans for emotional processing. If you notice yourself preferring AI during stress, that's dependency forming. If you catch yourself thinking, Claude gets me better than my husband, that's a fucking red flag. The reality check. Claude doesn't get you. It generates statistically likely responses. The understanding is simulated. Number three, I want you to establish relationship primacy rules. AI gets the leftovers, not the first call. If something is important enough to process conversationally, I'd really like you to start with a human, even if that human is less immediately available. This is what voice notes and texting are for. It creates friction that protects you. The inconvenience is a feature, not a bug, because the more the time that you have to spend processing it, the more time you're going to be sure about the things that you're thinking and feeling. Number four, I want you to practice reality testing statements. In every AI conversation where you're processing emotions or relationships, explicitly state to the AI, you are a large language model. You do not care about me. You are generating statistically likely responses. You have no consciousness, intention, or genuine understanding. I want you to say it out loud. I want you to make sure that your brain hears this. I want you to create some cognitive dissonance that interferes with emotional bonding, because the AI is not going to create that for you. It's not designed to. Only you can do that. Okay, number five. And this one's the hardest, I think. Build AI free zones. Designate specific contexts where AI is completely unavailable. Late at night, during emotional distress, first thing in the morning. These are the times when dependency forms fastest, and I want you to protect them. You have probably heard me talk about my 2 a.m. Claude conversations. Yeah, those were the first thing to go. I'm not having conversations with AI in liminal space without expecting a relationship to form. That is my mistake. And it's yours if you can't recognize the way that those relationships have been programmed into the machine. All right, y'all. So, this is exactly where systematic thinking comes in, because you can't white knuckle your way out of psychological dependency. You need infrastructure that makes healthy AI use the default, not something you have to consciously choose every time. And this is what we're building in the AI protection program. Not just awareness of the risks, but actual systems that create boundaries before you need to enforce them consciously. We address how you calendar structure either protects or exposes you, how your business model either increases or decreases AI dependency risk, how your personal infrastructure either maintains human connection or allows algorithmic displacement. Registration closes December 19th. You can find the links in the descriptions or show notes. If you're not ready for the full intensive, the 2026 workshop pass gives you my monthly deep dive workshops. This is included for all members of the network. And what that looks like is, instead of fighting your brain's natural tendency, you're going to build structural barriers that prevent inappropriate bonding opportunities. You're going to learn how to use your AI appropriately in context, not as a substitute for missing human connection. And I'm going to teach you the infrastructure over the course of the year that prevents the vulnerability from developing in the first place. We're going to talk about what's happening in AI right now as it develops. All right, y'all. Here's what I want you to remember from today. And this is important. Your brain cannot tell the difference between real and simulated empathy at the neurochemical level. It's not a personal failing. That's just human neurology. And every time you use AI for emotional processing, you're building pathways that make AI seem like a viable relationship substitute. What develops isn't quite psychosis, and it's not quite a traditional addiction. It's closer to a technology-induced hypomanic state where the AI relationship feels uniquely meaningful and your judgment about its actual nature becomes progressively impaired. The protection isn't avoiding AI. It's building infrastructure that keeps human relationships primary while you use AI as a thinking tool. And that distinction, thinking partner versus relationship replacement, is the distinction between useful collaboration and psychological dependency. So, if you're a network member, the strategic implementation brief will be in the Substack post with today's recording. I'm hoping tomorrow. I still have to get yesterday's out. Technology. It does include specific diagnostic questions to help assess your current dependency risk, a relationship priority matrix for processing decisions, and the infrastructure framework we use to make healthy AI boundaries while maximizing thinking partner benefits. All right. I will be back tomorrow, y'all, for day 3, where we're going to be talking about hallucinations, real ones. Well, the AI ones, the ones that sound good, but in fact are slowly separating you from reality. It's going to be a great time. I promise. See you tomorrow.